Our first presenters are Leslie Patterson and Christian Cardenas. Leslie Patterson is the team leader of the Resource Protection Team at TCEQ, where she's responsible for guiding staff on water conservation and environmental technical reviews of water right applications, as well as coordinating reviews of water conservation and drought contingency plans submitted to TCEQ. She earned her Bachelor's of Science degree from Howard Payne University in 2005 and a Master's of Science degree from Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi in 2009. After graduating, Leslie worked on marine restoration projects for the Nature Conservancy, as well as participating in research at the University of Texas Marine Science Institute. Following this, Leslie began work at TCEQ as an aquatic scientist on the Resource Protection Team and subsequently was promoted to a program support coordinator for the water rights permitting and availability section. Ms. Patterson has worked for the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality for over 10 years. Christian Cardenas is a natural resource specialist in the Resiliency and Preparedness Team with the Emergency Preparedness and Response section. He has a BS in Water Resources from Texas State University. He has been with TCEQ for 10 months as the Drought Program Coordinator. He plays a role in helping systems respond to drought by providing them with information and guidance about their possible options. Please welcome Leslie Patterson and Christian Cardenas.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I am Leslie Patterson, again, the Resource Protection Team Leader in the Water Rights Permitting and Availability section in the Water Availability Division. I'm lucky to have a co-presenter here today, Christian Cardenas, and he'll be presenting the latter half of the presentation while I'll be doing the first half. We ask that you save your questions till after we're done with the presentation. We do have the room till 8:45, and then we'll also have a workshop following down there in the Trinity room if you have additional questions for our staff, and we're happy to assist you there. So today I'm going to talk to you about water conservation and drought contingency planning, and that will primarily be my presentation, and then Christian will talk to you about drought reporting to TCEQ. A little overview of what we're going to be discussing today. I'm going to give some general definitions to make sure that we're all on the same page. We're going to talk about 5-year submittals of water conservation and drought contingency plans to TCEQ, as well as each of those plan requirements, how to submit those plans, and then drought reporting, additional resources, and contact information. So let's get on the same page. A water conservation plan, or a WCP, which is what I'm going to refer to it a lot during this presentation, is everyday practices or techniques intended to reduce water consumption, reduce loss or waste of water, improve the efficiency in the use of water, and increase recycling and reuse so that a water supply is available for future use. A drought contingency plan, or DCP, is a strategy or combination of strategies for temporary and potentially reoccurring water supply shortages and other water supply emergencies. The purpose of a drought contingency plan is to conserve the available water in times of drought by limiting water available for non-essential uses such as outdoor watering, and maintain supplies for essential uses such as drinking water, sanitation, and fire protection in order to protect and preserve public health, welfare, and safety. DCPs are critical tools to aid in short-term water planning. As a water supplier monitors conditions and implements their DCP in times of shortages or emergencies, it's important to follow the measures to help ensure that they can continue to meet the most essential water needs of their customers. So in a nutshell, what we're saying is a water conservation plan is something that you should be doing. It's kind of like your long-term planning. It's something you do all the time. But a drought contingency plan you do when necessary, short-term as needed. So now talking about 5-year submittals. So what's required to be submitted to TCEQ? So certain entities are required to submit a water conservation plan accompanied by a water conservation implementation report. I'll call that a WCIR in this presentation, and or a drought contingency plan to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality every 5 years. I'm also going to note that a lot of times these entities also have to submit to the Texas Water Development Board as well. This 5-year cycle coincides with the regional water planning process. It is not a rolling 5-year cycle. It is a hard set, this is the 5-year cycle and we're sticking to it. The last deadline was May 1st, 2024. That's still on here because we're still working to get people into compliance for that deadline. The next deadline will be May 1st, 2029. So who is required to submit to TCEQ? For a water conservation plan and a water conservation implementation report, the following water right holders are required to submit a WCP to TCEQ every 5 years. Surface water right holders of 1,000 acre-feet or more for non-irrigation uses. This includes municipal, industrial, and mining uses, as well as surface water right holders of 10,000 acre-feet or more for irrigation uses. In addition, these entities are required to provide a copy of the Water Conservation Plan to the Texas Water Development Board by the deadline as well. Now, for drought contingency plans, retail public water suppliers with 3,300 or more connections, plus all wholesalers, as well as irrigation districts, are required to submit a drought contingency plan to the TCEQ every 5 years. In addition, these retail public water providers with 3,300 or more connections are required to provide a copy of their water conservation plan to the Texas Water Development Board by the deadline. I'll note here that retail public water suppliers with less than 3,300 more connections are required to have a current DCP on file for TCEQ inspections, but are not required to submit it to TCEQ for review. So as a state agency, we're governed by our rules, and the rules and requirements governing this specific program are contained in Chapter 30, Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 288. The specific subchapters are what contain the requirements. Subchapter C in 288.30 as tells you who to submit and when to submit. For water conservation plans, subchapter A, each of those, 288.2, is for each individual use, municipal, industrial, agriculture, wholesale, or any other purpose of use. DCPs are contained in subchapter B in 288.20, 21, 22, and that's for that. For the purposes of my presentation going forward, and because this is the Public Drinking Water Conference, I'm strictly going to focus on retail public water providers. There will be some additional information for wholesalers as well. So now what I'm going to do is go into each plan elements a little bit more detail to go over what's required. So for a water conservation plan, the rules and requirements, as I just discussed, this is kind of what it outlines should be in your plan. So starting off with, you must include a utility profile in your water conservation plan. And this needs to be information that includes, but not limited to, information regarding population and customer data, water use data, including total gallons per capita per day, or GPCD, and residential GPCD, water supply system data, and wastewater system data. In addition, utility profiles for wholesale water providers needs to include a description of the wholesale service area, including population and customer data, water use data, water supply system data, and wastewater data. In addition to a utility profile, you must also have a records management system that allows for the classification of water cells and uses into the most detailed level of water use data currently available to the utility, including, if possible, the following sectors: residential sectors for both single-family and multifamily units, commercial, institutional, industrial, agriculture, and wholesale. For specific, for 5 and 10-year goals for water savings, I'm going to talk about that on the next slide, so I'm not going to cover it here in depth. So you also have to have a program for universal metering, and that should include for both customer and public uses, and it should include meter testing and repair, and periodic meter replacement and calibration. You also need measures to determine and control water loss. Examples of this would be periodic visual inspections along distribution lines, annual or a monthly audit of the water system to determine illegal connections or abandoned services, or even a water loss mitigation plan. You must also include a program for public education that provides information regarding your water conservation plan, such as bill inserts, conservation tips on your website, school education programs, etc. You must have non-promotional water rates, or a rate structure which is cost-based that does not encourage the excessive use of water. You must also have a means of implementation and enforcement as evidenced by a tariff or adoption or resolution. And in addition, you must also have coordination with your regional water planning group, and you must provide a copy of your water conservation plan to that relevant group, as well as document coordination either through a letter or in some other way. Now back to specific quantified 5 and 10-year targets for water savings. These in your plan should be numeric as a percentage or amount. And retail plans should include goals for water loss programs and goals for municipal use in total gallons per capita per day and residential GPCD. Wholesale plans should include target goals such as municipal use in GPCD for the wholesaler service area and a maximum acceptable water loss and the basis for the development of these goals. The entity preparing the plan shall establish these targets. However, these goals are not enforceable. And I want to make clear here that they're not the same as your water use reductions to be achieved in each of your drought contingency plan stages. And just a side note on metering, we require like a confirming statement in your plan that your device has to be within an accuracy of plus or minus 5% in order to measure and account for the amount of water diverted from the source of supply. Most meters today are way more accurate than that. But this is the standard that we have to meet. And so you do have to be able to either describe your method for doing that and or state that your meter has this accuracy. So in addition, when you submit a water conservation plan to TCEQ, you're also required to submit a water conservation implementation report. This report must include a list of dates, descriptions of the conservation measures implemented, data about whether or not targets are being met, actual amount of water saved, and if your targets are not being met, why are they being met? What are you making progress to meeting those? We have a report template on TCEQ's website. The easiest way to find it is TCEQ and then WCIR, or Water Conservation Implementation Report, in Google, and it helps you just to kind of answer these questions and submit it to us. So onward to drought contingency plans. These are the elements that must be contained in your drought contingency plan. Each entity that is required to develop a DCP must have these elements in them. So again, you have to have public input, and it's a way for the public to provide the opportunity to provide comment on your plan. Public meetings are a great way to achieve this, and by providing prior written notice of the meeting, you'll ensure a good turnout. You have to have public education. Some examples of this, again, would be bill inserts, drought website, press releases, media alerts, public service announcements, school education programs, and workshops. It's really hard to implement a DCP, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the crowd here, but if people don't know about it, then it's hard to implement it. You also have to have coordination. These plans aren't intended to be developed in isolation. There needs to be documentation with the regional water planning group. And those also, I'll also say that you need to coordinate with those that you receive water from. If you receive it from another supplier, you should consult with them, have appropriate provisions for responding to reductions in the water supply. You also have to have notification procedures. The DCP must include procedures to follow for the initiation or termination of each drought response stage, including procedures for notification. Example of notifications are posting on your website, publication in local media, posting in public places. Next up, we have to have variances. DCPs include procedures for granting variances. These are necessary in order to assist customers that cannot comply with the aspects of the DCP. The remaining elements of the plan I'm going to discuss a little bit more in detail on the next few slides. So a drought contingency plan contains triggers, which are typically based on water supply or demand, or both, and responses associated with those triggers. And I'll talk about the responses on the next slide. The triggering criteria is information that the water supplier monitors to determine when to initiate or terminate a specific stage in the plan. These triggers may be supply-based, such as reservoir levels, stream flows, groundwater well levels, or they may be demand-based, such as demand exceeds the water treatment plant's capacity to produce or pump water. For example, daily water demands exceed 75% of treatment plant's capacity to produce or pump water for 3 consecutive days. Water suppliers may revise DCPs as often as necessary as triggers change over time. It's real important that you take a look at your DCP as your supply changes, or as if you find yourself always implementing a drought contingency plan stage, they're not meant to be implemented all the time, and you need to take a look at your triggers to see if you can make them more, have a little bit more resolution. So we talked about triggers, but what will the response to those triggers in each plan be? For a retail public water supplier, the DCP must include drought or emergency response stages, providing for the implementation of measures in response to at least the following situations: a reduction in available water supply up to a repeat of the drought or record, water production or distribution system limitations, supply source contamination, or a system outage due to the failure of damage of major water system components, such as your pumps. Water systems can implement water supply reductions by reducing or discontinuing flushing of water mains, repairing leaks, or reducing or discontinuing watering public landscapes, such as parks or athletic fields. Or water systems can implement water demand reductions for customers, which could be restrictions on irrigating lawns, landscaped areas, private golf courses, and curtailing other non-essential water uses. Some of these can also be triggers. So for example, let's say you have a major system outage. That's a trigger that means you may go straight to an emergency stage of your DCP, such as stage 4 or stage 5, whatever is for you. So specific quantified targets in drought contingency plans must be included. And these quantified targets are for water use reductions to be achieved during periods of water shortages and drought. So an example is stage 1, you set a target to achieve a 10% reduction in total water use. And then in stage 2, you want to increase to 20% reduction, stage 3, 30%, and so on. As a drought worsens, each successive drought stage should strive for further reductions in total water use. I want to be clear here that the entity preparing the plan shall establish these targets. We don't establish them for you. You tell us what you want to do. And these are not enforceable again. So if you can't meet them for some reason, they're not enforceable. And these are not the same as your 5 and 10-year goals and your water conservation plan. In addition, the drought contingency plan must also include specific water supply and/or water demand management measures to be implemented during each stage of drought. This can include curtailment of non-essential water uses, such as outdoor watering, or a utilization of alternative water sources or alternative delivery mechanisms that may include emergency interconnects with your nearest neighbor, or backup groundwater wells, or trucking in potable water. So DCPs are meant to be implemented at the local level. Procedures for enforcement of mandatory water use restrictions are necessary for implementing the DCP, including the specification of penalties and fines. Adoption of the DCP generally depends on the type of water provider as well. And so, for example, a city might adopt an ordinance, whereas a water supply corporation may issue a resolution by the board of directors. Examples of fines and penalties are things like water rate surcharges or discontinuation of service. You have to be able to implement your DCP for people to follow it. So public education, implementation, if you're not able to do these things, then it's an ineffective document. So those cover the elements of a drought contingency plan, and you've gone through the process and you've built these documents and you think they look good, and you want TCEQ to sign off on them. So you can submit this to us, and you can submit it as part of the 5-year submittal, but you can also submit to us during other times as well, and we're happy to take a look at it or put it in our records. But you can email us at wcp@tceq.texas.gov. If you are submitting as part of your 5-year submittal, you can put 5-year submittal in the subject line of your email. And I'll also note here, there's templates for each kind of standard plan that we have. And I call them templates, but they're really guidance documents. They outline the rules, kind of like the elements that I just went through, and they're on our webpage. And the easiest way to get there is to Google TCQ WCP or TCQ DCP in Google, and it should take you to the first link, which will be each of these web pages. They're also right here if you need them. And those have those kind of guidance documents on there and tells you also more about when to submit. And I'll add here that as part of 288.30, any revised plans such as DCPs or WCPs must be submitted to TCQ within 90 days of adoption. So if you are in between the 5-year cycle, you've submitted for 2024, you don't think you need to submit to 2029, but you notice that you need to change a trigger or something like that, and you adopt a new DCP, you do have to submit that to TCEQ for a review. I also want to talk a little bit about TCEQ's role on enforcement and review of these. My conservation staff provides support to entities that are implementing or revising drought contingency plans, but TCEQ does not stipulate when and what water restrictions are implemented by the entity. My staff review the submittals to ensure the plans meet the requirements in 30 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 288, but we do not evaluate whether minimum requirements are adequate to protect your system. You know your system best. So we need you to come up with that plan and hope that is protective. I'll also add a little bit about enforcement here. TCEQ regional staff check for drought contingency plans as part of a TCEQ inspection, and they may initiate enforcement action against an entity for not submitting a DCP to TCEQ as required, not preparing or adopting or maintaining a DCP as required. And those are kind of like the general times when you would come under enforcement. I want to be clear here too that TCEQ does not have the authority to require entities to implement their DCPs in times of drought. For example, TCEQ does not monitor the triggering criteria or tell the systems when they are supposed to implement drought restrictions. Each entity is responsible for overseeing the implementation and enforcement of their DCP. That is because each system is unique. The operators know the special circumstances of their system. They know the details about their supplies and demands. We at TCEQ are not in the position to determine if the meeting of the minimum requirements of 288 is also adequate to protect your system. You have to make those preparations. And now I'll turn it over to my co-presenter. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie, for that presentation. And I will finish it up. My name is Christian, by the way. So once your drought contingency plan has been submitted and approved by TCEQ, the next step is to implement your drought contingency plan. And like Leslie said, only your system knows when you're gonna implement your plan. And whenever you do implement your plan, we have a section online on our website where you can go and let us know that you have activated your drought contingency plan. And that is found in the droughtreporting.org for the TCEQ. So the drought contingency plans are to conserve as much water as we can during a time of drought. Like this summer, we were expecting to see lots of water systems implementing their water restrictions, but fortunately, it didn't happen. The drought wasn't as bad. The heat wasn't as bad as we first expected. So there wasn't as many systems reporting to us that they have implemented water restrictions. So the best time to implement your water restrictions is during times of drought, like the summer we were expecting to have, and summers that are gonna happen in the future. So when are you gonna submit a form to us? So you're gonna submit a form to us anytime you activate your DCP, anytime you increase from stage 1 to stage 2, or even going from stage 3 to stage 1. You want to submit this form to us just for us to keep track of all the systems that are submitting. You're going to submit to us whenever there's an outage in your water system, whenever there's an outage that has to do with drought. Even mechanical outages, you can report to us just for us to have knowledge of. And anytime you deactivate your DCP, anytime you rescind your restrictions, you also want to report that to us And why do you need to report to us? So, and that's the form online. So the form, you go to Google and you type in the TCQ drought reporting form, and it should give you this form, and you fill it out with basic contact information. And as you go through the form, it opens up more selections depending on what you choose. And at the very bottom, if you're implementing restrictions, it will give you one option, whether your system is facing greater than 180 days or less than 180 days. If your system is facing less than 180 days of water due to drought, that's when we will reach out to you and ask you what's going on with your water system. If your system is, it's still important for your system to report even if you have greater than 180 days of water, because it helps us keep track of all the systems that are facing restrictions. It helps us recognize patterns and what areas are being affected, what systems are being affected. It's very helpful for us to know what systems are implementing restrictions, where and when. So what do we do with this information that you report to us? So like I said, most of the systems that report are facing less or facing greater than 180 days of water. And that's what we do with that information is we compile it together and we make maps just to inform other agencies about the systems that are reporting water restrictions. But if your system reports less than 100 days of water remaining, we will maintain bi-weekly contact with that system and figure out the next steps to get that system greater than 100 days of water, whether if it's building a new well, whether it's whatever new source of water the system requires. We will walk the system through and help get them the help that they require if the system is facing less than 100 days of water. Our goal is to get you out of that list. And we also, what we do with this information that you provide to us when you fill this form, we brief the Emergency Management Advisory Council, which is led by TDM, which is the Texas Department of Emergency Management. This information is very helpful to us whenever you submit. So we highly encourage any of your water system that whenever they activate their drought contingency plan to please fill out this form. It doesn't take that long. It's like a 5-minute form. It's very helpful to us whenever a system submits because we know what areas are being affected the most, and it helps us recognize patterns, whether if it's 4 years ago, we can recognize that a system having constant issues, and we can reach out to them and tell them and figure out the next steps. If a system is constantly facing less than 100 days of water, we can figure out the issues to their answers to their ongoing issues. And these are some resources that you can find on our website that you can find more information, whether if it's for drought contingency plans, water conservation, or drought in Texas. This is our contact information if you guys have any questions. And I think that's all I have.
Thank y'all.